Internet, your friendly neighborhood gremlin here, and today we've got more HHP. I know it's been a minute, but I did really need a break. And also the 100 days videos are actually really labor intensive, but they're also really fun, and it's doing really well on the channel. So we're in the process of making more of those. But I decided that I really wanted to build a museum. So here we are. And I went with Agnes, mostly because the museum that I had built her previously was an atrocity. So I thought we could rectify that situation. Though admittedly what she gets is more of like a history museum than an art museum. In fact, it's really not an art museum at all. We did the best we could with what we had, and that's about all you can do in Animal Crossing, really. But I thought I would tell y'all a story. Not that I'm sure anyone but me actually enjoys listening to me tell stories, but I don't really know what else to talk about, and I'd really like to get an Animal Crossing video out. I guess we're just a little bit out of practice with the whole talking about things I don't really have anything to say. It's also been like over a month since I actually recorded the footage for this video, so I went and found us a fairy tale. Downstairs here is mostly just like fossils and stuff, and then upstairs gets a little bit more Egyptian inspired, mostly because we're trying to put some art into the art museum she asked for, and it was the only sort of like vintage looking art, sort of went with downstairs. So I found an Egyptian fairy tale, but then I'm gonna tell you the westernized version of it because I'm a bad person. That's not actually true. It's because the Egyptian one sort of just like doesn't have an ending somehow. I don't really know. It just sort of like stops in the middle. I really don't have an explanation for that. So I found one in the Peter Opie color books, and he's retold the story. I think he based it on like a French version, and it is definitely a very sort of westernized version of the tale, which you can tell, but it is complete, and his dog doesn't eat him, or try to eat him, which is a thing I found that happened in one of the tales. Again, I'll have a couple of them linked down below for you. I'll see if I can find that one again, because I didn't save that one because it made me unhappy. And so I present to you the story of the Doomed Prince, or The Prince and His Three Fates, which are actually the same story, even though they have two different names. So our story begins with a king who longs desperately for a son. You know how all these stories start. And then he has a son, and he is beautiful, and he loves him, and then he brings fairies. In the original Egyptian version, they go and see the 7 sacred cows, or the Hathors is what they call them, and they like sort of give people their fates, but Western version, so fairies. And when the fairies arrive, they say, "Oh, it's such a pity. It is written in the Book of Fate that he will die either by a crocodile, a serpent, or a dog." And so our king makes the logical decision to lock his son up and not let anything get to him. And he just lives by himself in his own little palace with servants and stuff, entirely alone. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's not like a sad tower like you imagine like Rapunzel. It's got like a whole bunch of stuff for children to play with and all the finest things in the palace, and you know, he's still a prince. He's just not living with his father, who you think wanted him so badly he might, you know, want to father him. Anyway, when the prince is just sort of like hanging out and watching other people down below, he sees a cute little dog, and he asks the servant, "What's that? I want one." And in the Egyptian version, he's like almost grown is what it says, but the Western version says he's like 4 or 5. And so the servant goes to the king and is like, hey, your son wants a dog, and you said we're supposed to give him everything he wants, but you know, fates and all that. And in the Egyptian version, the king says, "Give my son a boar hunting dog, and they'll be friends," or whatever. In the Western version, he just says, "Oh, just get him a dog. He'll cry his heart out if he doesn't have one." Because, you know, spoiled rich boy who's never had anyone say no to him before. And he just gets like the cute little fluffy dog, like the one he saw, rather than, you know, a hunting dog who could be probably quite vicious and dangerous in the future. Though I suppose also could offer protection. So, I mean, it's a coin flip to see which is better. Again, in the story I'm going to tell you, the dog doesn't get evil, but there are versions where the dog does get evil, and then he grows a bit older and is kind of a little bit like, why am I stuck here? I know about the prophecy, but I'd rather die than live an idle life just sitting here being useless. And so the king says, "All right, I'll let you go." In the Egyptian version, it says that the king has taken a new wife, and she's the one who convinces the king to let the son go because she doesn't like him, because she's a stepmother, and that's how that works. So he takes his horse and his dog, and they sort of ride off until they reach another kingdom. In the Egyptian version, they just say that the person that is running the kingdom, I guess, or whatever, is a prince. So I don't know if there is a king somewhere else, or how that works, or what's going on. Anyway, in the Western version, they make the point to tell you that the king doesn't care about looking after his country, and because the people in the kingdom were happy. He just spent time inventing riddles and plans and, you know, just sort of being a bit of a weirdo. And so he builds his only child a house, which in the Western version has 70 windows, 70 feet from the ground, which seems like a lot of windows to be very high up. In the Egyptian version, they just say it's a house with a tall window many cubits from the ground. So, I mean, same thing, but also not 70 windows. And then he puts out the call to any prince who can climb the window will get to marry my daughter. And then so many princes come, they actually have a house that they can live in while they try to climb the wall to get to the princess. Yeah, I mean, that seems a bit extreme. So when our young prince arrives, he's greeted by these princes, and they sort of like bring him in and are like, hey, who are you? And he's like, in the Egyptian version of the tale, he just says, I'm a son of one of the horsemen of Egypt, but my mom died and my dad took a new wife and she's a stepmother, so she hates me, and so I fled. In the Western version, however, they make a point to say that he's keeping the fact that he's a prince a secret for his own reasons, not that they ever tell us what those reasons are. And his story is fairly similar. He said his dad was the master to the horse for the king of the country, and his mother died and he married a new wife, and it went well at first, and then she had babies. And so she hated me, and then I fled, lest she do me harm. And you can really sort of tell that this tale is, like, based on the other one, because, like, somehow these details come up and they're the same, but also kind of just, like, a little bit different, and they never mentioned the stepmother before. And then the princes tell him of the sort of daughter in a tower, marry her kind of deal, and he goes and he watches all the other princes try and sort of like formulates his own little plan. And then when he goes, he does indeed succeed, and the princess just, like, immediately falls in love with him the way princesses do. So they go and tell the king that the contest has been won, and then they tell him he's not a prince, and then the king is angry and he's like, no, send him away. They go see the princess and she says, no, you're not sending him away. And so then the king says, well, then we'll put him to death. And then the princess says, if he dies, I die. So they take the prince to meet the king, and then he just decides he likes him and everything is fine. A little bit weird. Also really not sure why he doesn't just say, oh yeah, actually I'm a prince. But he doesn't. Even when the king meets him and likes him, he just apparently has his reasons for staying silent, and we never find out what those reasons are. But they get married, and the prince tells his wife that he has this sort of weird prophecy fate thing where he'll die at the hands of a crocodile, a serpent, or a dog. She looks at his dog and is like, yeah, we're gonna have that thing killed. And he's like, no, it's my dog, it's okay. And so she just kind of lets that go. And here the story has another little, like, strange difference. In the Egyptian version, he's just, like, in Egypt on a, like, hunting thing or whatever, I guess. He's also accompanied by a giant, and he runs into the crocodile, and then the giant, like, manages to keep the crocodile away because he's a giant, but also he can't kill the crocodile because it is sacred. However, in the Western version, he learns that his stepmother has died, and so he goes home, and while he's on his way home, while he's sleeping one night, there's a crocodile, and the guard sort of wakes up and catches it. They put it in a hole, and then it's watched over by a giant, which is never explained. And in the Western version, he just kind of decides he's now going to stay in his father's kingdom, which implies that there was an evil stepmother, which is why he left. But the story told us that he left because he didn't want to be stuck in this house forever. So, I don't know. This doesn't happen in the Egyptian version. They just keep living where they were living. One night while they're sleeping, the princess wakes up and she notices that there's a snake coming in to get him, and then she puts down a bowl of milk, and apparently snakes cannot resist milk, and so it drinks the milk and then it falls asleep, and then she cuts its head off. In the Egyptian version, she calls for her servants and they bring some drugged wine, so it makes sense that the snake sort of is easier to kill, but also why did the snake want to drink the wine? Okay, and then the Western version makes this weird because the morning after the snake thing happened, he goes to his father's palace and apparently he died, so they bury him, and the prince becomes the king, and then he sort of deals with laws and business and all that sort of stuff, and he's really tired, so he retires to a palace by the riverside. He just became king, and he's already sort of retiring. I imagine he intends to go back, but still. None of that happens in the Egyptian version. It just says, like, shortly after he goes for a walk with his dog, and he sees the crocodile, and the crocodile says, I am your doom. I will remember you, and I will follow after you. The dog leads him to the giant, and the prince is saved again. And that's just where that ends. No other explanation of anything at all. The Western version, however, is different and also continues. So the prince meets Crocodile and he says, you cannot escape from me, I'll follow you wherever you go, but I will give you this one chance. If you can dig a pit in the dry sand and fill it with water and have it stay full of water, the spell will be broken and you can go. I don't know what sort of spell that is, but that's what he says. And so he goes home, pretty sure he's just gonna die, but when he tells his wife what the crocodile said, she's like, oh, is that all oh, that's easy. My fairy godmother taught me about plants and stuff, and there's this one herb that'll keep the water in the pit for a whole year. Easy peasy. I'll set out tomorrow and go get it for you. And so she leaves at dawn, and apparently she exaggerated the easy bit, and getting the herb is going to be really fucking hard. But she loves her husband and doesn't want him to die, so she's gonna go do all this hard, scary work. And here's another one of those strange details that wasn't mentioned before, but is now apparently important. They're like going across the desert, so they're kind of thirsty and ready to give up almost, and she's very determined and is like, I had to be back before evening, or the crocodile will say it didn't work. Not that he mentioned anything about it having to happen tomorrow night, or never at all. I guess they just forgot to mention that part in the story. These are apparently the terms and conditions of this loophole. After they've crossed the desert, they get to the stone on top which the herb exists, but there's a giant chasm around it, and so she has to like throw a rope and just trust that nothing bad will happen. Then she goes to try and get to the herb, and then the rocks crumble beneath her feet, so she has to try again and be really careful about which rocks she uses. And apparently this tears up her hands because they're all bloody by the time she gets there. But when she succeeds and sort of ends up on the top of the rock, she finds that the wind is so violent that she'd be blinded by dust, and so she has to throw herself to the ground and just sort of feel around for the herb. It takes her so long to find it that she is beginning to panic and like, oh no, maybe it's not here. But she does find it, and she takes a leaf, and then she goes back down, and her and the donkey move very speedily back and get there before evening. So she goes to where the prince has dug his pit. He's got like a pot of water beside it, and the crocodile's just kind of sitting there watching with its mouth open, maybe to like imply it's ready to eat him or something. But she puts the herb on the water, and they put it in the thing and stand and wait for half an hour, and the water's still in the pit. So the crocodile leaves, and he has now successfully bested the second of his 3 fates. And while they're standing around and celebrating this win, the dog sees a wild duck, and in pursuit of the duck, he sort of knocks the prince's legs, and the prince falls into the water, but his wife saves him. And it literally just says the poor old dog was drowned, but the prince was pulled to shore. So I don't know if the dog drowned because it was trying to save him after it realized what happened, or if they just decided to drown the dog. The fact that they say the dog drowned before the prince got out of the river seems to imply the dog drowning like on its own accord trying to save the prince, but genuinely unclear. And then he's all like, my wife is stronger than my fates, because you know his wife is technically the one who saved him from all of these fates. And this concludes story time. I hope that you didn't mind too much that the first Animal Crossing video back was just me telling you a story. I enjoyed it. These videos don't really do very well anyway, which feels weird to say, but the 100 days video has like 1.5k views, which is insane. But also, we're not going to totally abandon Animal Crossing on the channel, I promise. I think maybe we'll do some more of the giving the villagers exactly what they asked for kind of videos, because they're fun and don't end up with me telling you a fairy tale. If you have any thoughts or opinions, or just want to say hi, you can do that in the comments down below. And of course, if you liked the video, you can hit that like button. And if you really liked it, and you think you might want to see more of it, you could hit that subscribe button, which is probably more useful than it used to be, because I am terrible at keeping to schedules, apparently. Actually, it's just harder when you don't have to do a thing every day, and I tend to vastly overestimate what I'm going to be able to get done in between having to lay down, because the nausea or my head is making it impossible for me to sit up any longer. But I will see y'all soon. I'm hoping to get out a Littlewood 100 days video next, and then maybe we'll try and alternate in between 100 days and Animal Crossing. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Goodbye!